Hey everybody, welcome back to The Pulse. Today we continue our discussion about advocacy and specifically some common forms of action, what we think does and doesn't work, and we offer some personal insights. We also have Lucas back with us today to join this discussion, so let's get back into it.
Now that we've got sort of a basic overview of what we think advocacy is, I want to go into detail a little bit more, and I want to start with boycotts, and well, no, actually, I want to start with boycotts because Luke, I know you have some perspective and opinions on that, and I think if you can start us off, we talk about something that doesn't work first. We'll cut our way through the weeds and get to the things that do work. So tell us about boycotts.
So in regards to boycotts, I find when it comes to that, this is again from my perspective only, and not generally of everybody. So, and I'm being very honest here when it comes to our community. When we begin here, is that the fact is that everyone's voice is unique and in their own right. We're not again, just want to make that abundantly clear before we get started. Anyways, so boycotts mean like generally like, oh, I don't like to deal with this certain brand, dealing with this, dealing with that. One thing I have noticed when it comes to boycotts, again, this is just from my end of the spectrum, my end of the argument. Again, everyone else here has their own takes and their own thoughts. The only reason I don't think it makes a lot of sense from my end perspectively is that it actually doesn't look like a good PR standpoint. Because you also have to understand that, let's say someone on the other end, let's say if it's a company or something like that, they have no training. They likely have no training. They're like, what the heck do I do? I have nothing. It's more or less we go back on the education factor and go from there, because sometimes education can solve the problem, and so that because some people, they might not even know. That's just what it is, unfortunately. So when we're dealing with the boycott kind of aspect, it's not. I mean, it is a dicey topic, and I mean, absolutely. But there's some points when boycotts usually don't really work. Unfortunately, they sometimes accidentally backfire.
It just highlights the negative attitudes floating around, right? I like that a lot. Thank you. Kayla, do you have any thoughts on protests?
I think marches and protests are a good way of getting attention, but shouldn't be the only form of action you're taking. Once you get the attention, it you need to sit down and talk and teach people what you were protesting about, and also listen to them in order to be able to teach them on their level and help them understand. Because if all you're doing is yelling at them, they're probably not going to listen.
And I think also with like marches and protests, like like everyone, like there has to be a very clear and like generally agreed upon like thing that you're like marching or protesting for, because like it can't be like too like specific. It has to be like broad enough where like it would work.
Also, one thing I will add into this is that a lot of people use like boycotts and stuff and like to get their message across. But the reason they fail is because they're sounding like they're too angry when it comes to stuff like this. And companies usually go like, yeah, they're just bad. They're just not. People will just ignore them, because the problem though is they're not trying to follow through. That's why most of these boycotts fail, is because they're just ignoring people who just do not want to open the conversation. They're just basically like, oh, these people, it's like, whatever. These people just want to be bad apples on social media and they don't want to give a darn. So, to be honest, we'll just ignore it and we'll move on. That's pretty much what the problem is when it comes to online boycotts or boycotts like this, is because they just need to understand that once you fulfill it, you have to make sure the messaging is straight across. Otherwise, like most boycotts I see, they usually go like this. They fail so fast, it's like everyone just forgets and moves on, and it's like rinse, wash, repeat. This is why I don't believe boycotts, from my perspective, makes a lot of sense, because it always ends in failure. I hate to say it.
I couldn't agree more. And we talked about it a little bit last week. That's why the VOA has the perspective of welcoming protests to whatever event we're at. And I specifically like that we can listen to protesters, because when we show them that we want to listen, they're more likely to relax and engage in a conversation other than, a yelling match, which, yeah, exactly. Fist pumps, right? That kind of thing. So, yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you for throwing that in there too. So in terms of educating, we've talked before about how the educating needs to come from us, which is great, because that's where the information should come from. But the idea that it's our job to teach is a lot of pressure. What do you guys think are the best ways to educate people?
I think, like, if somebody comes up to you and they express an opinion that maybe is very stereotypical or isn't quite correct, if you can just be like, I hear what you're saying, but this is the way we like to, or this is the language that we like to use, or there are so many different ways that that can present itself. Or like there was an instance just a couple weeks ago where somebody was referring to high functioning and low functioning, and I really like the support scale, and that expresses exactly how much support somebody needs. And so I just jumped in to be part of the conversation and told them about the support scale versus the functioning scale, and they seemed to really appreciate that. Um, and it was just a quick conversation, and I listened to what they had to say, and they listened to me, and it turned out really good. Um, so yeah, things like that where you can just be, you listen to their side and let them know that you're listening, so that you you can help to meet them on their level, like we talked about before, and explain to them nicely your side of things, and not yell at them because they got something wrong.
I will actually follow Kayla's response because I think it's absolutely respectable. Because, when it comes to online discourse, especially when it comes to our community, there's always the fact that, like, not only education from our allies, but also within the community themselves as well. I've seen if you want to know, there is always that divide, unfortunately, which is a good point to bring up in this conversation about education too, is that sometimes we don't agree on everything. It's a tough opinion. Sometimes you like have this opinion versus that opinion. It's always, like that. But that's okay. We all have our own opinions, and everyone's opinions are always respected. And especially, I see a lot of people out, like going back to what Kayla's saying. A lot of people are just, they're curious, but they're too afraid to ask. That's why I tell people all the time, don't hesitate to pick my brain. I don't care. I mean, I'm not easily offended. I don't get triggered so easily. If people have different ways of saying it, I don't care. I just think, when people want to keep the door open, they're wanting to learn, they're wanting to listen, they're wanting to engage. That's the way we should, as advocates, we should respect that, because some people, it's not a matter of, let's say, for example, they're ignorant. They want to ask, but they're too nervous to. That's pretty much what it is. They just feel like, oh, I don't want to offend too many people nowadays, unfortunately, in this world. But you know what? Don't hesitate. If you're too nervous to ask, don't. You could always say, hey, I don't want to, be too offensive. Is this, things that are okay?
I love that.
Unfortunately, also, sometimes you will get people who just don't listen. They have their ideas, and that's what they're going to stick to. And I think, unfortunately, there are some people that aren't really teachable. and you kind of have to just brush it off. Because, like, there was one time I was at an event with one of the autism organizations that I work for, and somebody came up to me and they're like, well, do they hire autistic individuals? And I'm like, yeah, I'm autistic. And then they they what's the words I'm looking for? And then they were like, oh, so you must be really smart, you must really like science or math. And I'm like, I suck at both those things. I am so bad with numbers. And they're like, oh, so you play an instrument, what instrument do you play? I'm like, no, I have no musical abilities at all. And they're like, oh, you must play something. And they started listing off instruments. And I'm like, no, I do not play any instruments. Every time they listed an instrument. And this person just would not let up. And afterwards, I just walked away and I went, and just left it because I was like, I'm not going to teach this person anything because they don't want to listen. And unfortunately, there are those people out there.
I think,
You
yeah, I
know,
think there are people that out there that are just looking to be triggered, right? Like they're looking for something to get upset about because they feel like that's their mission is to correct everyone. And oh my goodness gracious, that does not feel like advocacy. That feels like I'm getting sent to the corner or something. I'm like, oh
It's
my
like
god,
they
they
to
don't
be
deserve
on,
to exist.
to be honest, people like them are just prone to be troublemakers. Basically, they just want to put a rile on people. You see it all the time. Trolls, trolls, people who just like to call like trolls online. They just try to rile up folks. Those kind of people. Simple as that. Put your headphones on, or just make a quick excuse, just saying, "Oh, sorry, I seem to, I've just been just check my phone, like my watch or something. Oh shoot, I gotta be somewhere." Basically, if they're not just wanting to, basically not learn to listen. You always have the right to excuse yourself from the conversation if these people just do not want to give a darn. Unfortunately, there are people like that, but you know what? People who don't want to learn, they're in the minority. And there's people out there who actually, they say education never stops after school. It continues post. You know what I mean? Everyone thinks, oh, I'm out of school, I don't have to learn anymore, I know everything. No, that is not true. Every day is a new learning experience. I've learned that every new day. I mean, and again, not perfect. No one is perfect. Everyone has their flaws. I tell this to everybody. And you know what? We're all imperfect. Every single one of us. There is no such thing that I can recall of being normal in that sense. Because what is it? Like, what is normal?
That does it for this week's episode of The Pulse. Next time we'll get into how voting is a form of advocacy and how we can use it to make our voices heard. With a little help, we can join the biggest conversation and advocate for our values. As always, if you have ideas or topics you'd like us to discuss, or if you want to be a guest on the show, send an email to voa@pacificautismfamily.com. We look forward to more of your great questions. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.